At its very beginning, the 11th century looked very promising for the Eastern Roman Empire. Under the remarkable Emperor Basil II, the empire had reasserted control over its formerly lost Balkan provinces. These Byzantine rulers scored victories against both the external enemies of the empire and the ambitious aristocracy from the Anatolian peninsula. The military nobility from Asia Minor had been experiencing a precipitous increase in their influence ever since the 9th century. Many emperors failed to keep in check the growing power of the so-called Anatolian Dinatoi. However, Basil II was not one of those emperors. Thanks to a series of intricate reforms, the Macedonian emperor successfully decreased some of the power of the Anatolian nobility in favor of the lower Byzantine social castes. The era of prosperity and stability ushered in during Basil's reign would go straight downhill following his death in 1025. Not marrying even once during his half-a-century-long reign, Basil did not leave any heirs. And so with his death, his incompetent brother Constantine inherited the position of emperor. The reign of Constantine would be short and uneventful, leaving two of his daughters as his heirs, Zoe and Theodora. Those two would go down in history as the last members of the Macedonian dynasty, which had been ruling the empire for over a century and a half, with both of these women failing to produce any heirs. Zoe would marry multiple times, with her husbands inheriting the position of emperor. However, all spouses of the Macedonian princes would prove to be massive failures as emperors. Lacking the charisma of Basil, they would slip in their attempts to control the Anatolian aristocracy, widening the gap between the bureaucracy in Constantinople and the military elite. Paying off supporters and foreign mercenaries, the emperors of the 11th century would debase the Byzantine solidus, causing rampant inflation that would only be fixed by one Alexius Comnenus. In the 1050s, the influential Anatolian Ducas family took control of the Byzantine throne with the ascension of Constantine X. Ignoring their ambitious Anatolian kinsmen, the massive threat from the newly established Seljuk Empire, and further debasing the Byzantine solidus, the Ducas emperors laid the conditions for the future fall of Anatolia. Marrying the wife of the late Constantine X in 1068, Romanos Diogenes, a non-Ducas general, would attempt to stop the Turks from plundering Anatolia, but would be utterly defeated in one of the worst military disasters in Byzantine history, the Battle of Manzikert. Romanos would be succeeded by yet another Ducas, Michael VII. His reign would see the eruption of numerous uprisings in Anatolia, eventually leading to the loss of the peninsula to the Seljuk Turks. The Byzantine Empire would never fully recover from the crisis of the 11th century. So what if this period of instability never took place? What if Byzantium remained as powerful as Basil II had left it? Let us imagine an alternative scenario in which Basil marries and produces a male heir named Alexander sometime during the year 990. The young Macedonian prince would join his father during his campaigns against the Bulgarian Empire, learning firsthand from the best of the best how to command armies. In 1025, aged 36, Basil's son assumes the title of emperor as Alexander II. For the new Macedonian emperor, the apple would not fall far from the tree. Alexander would continue introducing reforms that would lower the power of the Anatolian nobility. Having his Varangian guard and Macedonian lineage on his side, no one would dare oppose the new emperor. Alexander would also maintain his father's tolerant policy towards the newly incorporated Bulgarian people and nobility, preventing future uprisings or at least lowering their severity. And so the empire remains stable. However, trouble would still be expecting Rome. The newly arrived Seljuk Turks would begin raiding Anatolia. If we assume that Alexander's successor is at least half as competent as his father and grandfather, he would be able to solve the problem diplomatically. By promising support to the Seljuks against Fatimid Egypt, large-scale conflict would be avoided. The Byzantine Empire is still likely to experience a period of instability in the late 11th century, with the Norman and Pecheneг advances on its Balkan territories. However, the following 12th century would be a period of peace and stability. Anatolia remaining Byzantine means no crusades in this timeline. This might slightly slow European progress and damage long-distance trade. The Crusades led to higher maintenance of the European road systems leading to the Holy Land. They also played a part in the decline of feudalism in Europe, as a lot of the landed aristocracy spent much of their resources by partaking in these campaigns. And so in this alternative timeline, the Renaissance and decline of serfdom would still occur, but take slightly longer to go in full swing. Now let's go back to our main topic, Byzantium. The Roman era of prosperity would end with the Mongol invasions of the 13th century. Constantinople would be forced to deal with the Central Asians on both its northern and eastern frontiers, eventually losing parts of Anatolia to the Ilkhanate. Tired from the Mongol raids, the Bulgarian, Serbian and Vlach peasants from the Balkans would rebel against Constantinople. And so Bulgaria and Serbia would re-emerge as independent states once again. The wave of political decentralization that hit Europe in the 14th century would reach Byzantium as well. This, combined with the Black Plague, would make the 1300s a period of slow decline for Eastern Rome. A new crisis would emerge with the conquest of the Turkic warlord Timur. After consolidating his rule over all of Persia, the nomadic chieftain would seek the massive wealth of the Roman Empire. And so Timur would likely conquer central Anatolia from the Byzantines in the early 15th century, and even attempt on sieging the Queen of Cities, Constantinople. This period of Byzantine downfall would likely end in the latter half of the 1400s with the collapse of the Timurid Empire. As was often the case with Roman history, a series of competent Byzantine emperors would save the empire from total collapse. By the 16th century, the empire would have reconquered Anatolia before shifting its aim to the declining Balkan kingdoms, annexing them as well. However, a strong foe would appear to the east. Persia would be united once again under the Safavid dynasty. Without the Ottomans to stop them, the Persians would conquer Mesopotamia and Egypt. The following 2 centuries would see only slight border changes, with the Byzantines waging occasional wars against the Safavids, Habsburgs and Poles. In the 19th century, Eastern Rome would try its luck in the colonization game, starting by taking Egypt from a declining Persia, and later expanding southwards down to Ethiopia. With the rise of nationalism, Rome loses some of its Balkan regions to newly established Slavic states, entering in a conflict with its former Orthodox ally Russia over the rights of the Balkan Slavs. Fearing Russia's policy of expanding southwards down to the Mediterranean, Byzantium joins the anti-Russian losing side in the Great Wars of the 20th century. This eventually leads to Rome losing all of its colonies in Africa and a short period of civil unrest. The latter half of the 20th century would see a mass demand for liberal reforms from the impoverished populace, and so the conservative absolutist Byzantine monarchy would be abolished and a constitutional one would be established in its place. Despite its losses in the Great Wars, Byzantium remains a regional power, with its standard of living and economy vastly improving in the following decades. Thank you to all who stayed till the end, and special thanks to my patrons who support my channel financially. My channel has been demonetized for a couple of months now, and without my patrons I wouldn't be able to make these videos. If you wish, you can support the channel on Patreon, link down in the description. That's all from me, and I'll see you in the next one.